I'm going to sit right here and look at the camera.
I'm going to sit right here and look at, and I see you. This is wonderful. Okay, welcome. Brian, thank you so much for being here. This is our second conversation, and I am so glad you're here. We are going to be talking about creating space. That is our theme for April. And to me, it just goes with April. It just goes with April because we have new beginnings, we have new life. Stuff is bursting out. And so in our own little hearts, we are looking for ways to create space and move forward.
Yes.
So I'm very glad to see you. And I also will disclose that we had a great conversation yesterday where we talked about a lot of these things. After about 10 minutes, we decided that conversation was not going to be the one we show, but it was a wonderful conversation nonetheless.
Yeah.
So when we were talking yesterday, it was funny. The first thing that we decided was, and you tell me if I'm speaking for you wrongfully, is that we are so enjoying spring, but we feel a little bit out of balance. And that's why the topic of creating space is so good, because there is an element of, perhaps discontent and judgment. And where do we go next? What do I do now? Life is busting out all over. There's no need to remain confined anymore. So how does that look for me?
Totally. And we confronted that there was, for both of us, we were kind of hitting a wall in that. I mean, for me, I've noticed a long time ago, the seasons have cycles that I am not exempted from. We have, in the relative comfort of the modern age, I think, tried to convince ourselves that we could be exempt from the rhythms of the world. We're just simply not. Winter is always a time of going within. It's a time of sparseness. It's a time of letting go. And it seems that spring for me consistently is a time of rebirth and renewal and growth, but that always comes dressed as urgency. That is not urgency that's like, hey, come on, it's great. It's this urgency that's like, hey, it's spring and you're late, and it's not.
What were you doing this winter? Why have you wasted all that time?
Right. It always feels that way. And coming into a spring now, I'm both vaccinated now, coming into a spring where we're vaccinated and able to emerge from our COVID cocoons increasingly, that urgency is at like a 12, and creating on a scale of 1 to 10, to be clear.
But see, then you combine that with the fact that we have been in this COVID lockdown. We are all in a state of, as you put it, PTSD from so many changes, so many dislocations and disruptions. We don't know what's next. But the good news was, at least for me, that as I sat there over the winter, locked down, hunkered down in my house, I kind of had this feeling there was nothing I needed to do right now, because as you said, we go within. Nobody's expecting me to burst forth and say, oh, Melanie, what are you showing now? Well, how are you producing now? It was a time when I gave myself permission to kind of just gestate and be quiet and be still and not have to produce or show or be or shine. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now it's spring. And the question becomes, how did I use that time? How is the new me going to show up? What is the new normal in which I have to swim? I don't know. That's a moving target.
And that's the key. That's where the creating space picks up. I don't know. That's where it picks up. I mean, we were talking, like, you and I, and on our Wednesday discussion calls, basically there often emerges a general sentiment of, yeah, that's all lovely and lofty, but how? What does that look like?
What does that look like?
Yeah, and we say a term like creating space, and I think it's squishy. What does that look like? I mean, it's I can see it. Like right now, I'm looking out past the computer at the yard, which is full of trees. I live in a forested area, and the world literally, it's so sparse in the winter, and then all of these new life emerges that takes up space. in a different way. And creating space is, I think, leaning into that not knowing, creating room to allow.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the way, you're exactly right. That's the way I think about it. And a note that I made as I was getting ready for today was just opening up to the possibility for joyful and creative expression.
Yes.
Just creating that possibility, as you put it, openness or willingness for joyful and creative expression.
You shared a quote. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You said something from Eckhart Tolle yesterday about clarity. What was that quote? Do you know?
It was about peace. I'll read it. I have it right here. It's from The Power of Now. And he wrote, it's about peace and surrender. He wrote, don't look for peace. Don't look for any other state than the one you are in now. Otherwise, you will set up inner conflict and unconscious resistance. Forgive yourself for not being at peace. The moment you completely accept your non-peace becomes transmuted into peace. Anything you accept fully will get you there, will take you into peace. This is the miracle of surrender.
And that'll do. That's the talk.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
fellowship and coffee. Yeah.
I mean, because that to me is, I yesterday when we got on a call, you were like, how you doing? I'm like, not good. I'm not good adjacent. I'm coming out of winter, coming into what is clearly the world. If you had asked me last May, about what was next, I would have talked about a readjustment as we move back into normal. But what's very clear to me, what?
Yeah, you did. That's what you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes. And what's happened since then is that, I alluded last year to, hey, the world as we knew it is over. It's really over now. I mean, it's a year later, it's just not the same world. And so how can I bring acceptance to what I'm feeling? Right? Because right now I am in this place of discontent and uncertainty and disappointment and self-judgment. It's this, I've heard a lot of people in my life who have been hating on themselves for not being more productive during this time, as if we all took a sabbatical to go write our book finally. Not that the world got imploded. This is exploded, Brian. Imploded's like this, but not that the world imploded, but that we took a vacation, and why didn't we use it better? That's not useful to me. And as I've been pushing back and hating on myself, that a lot of days I have this whole list of things I want to do and be productive and motivated and reinvent my life and all that. But mostly I just want to sit down and watch reruns of Blue Bloods, and how do I not hate on myself when that's what I need to do,
It's funny because I'm kind of the same way. I don't do Blue Bloods. I do like Downton Abbey. Okay, now everyone has found out way more about each of us than they ever needed to know.
Yeah, and it didn't used to be Blue Bloods for me. That's a new thing that I've gotten a needle in my vein. But go ahead.
Yeah. But it's almost like when I turn off and I just say, okay, I'm going to binge watch X, I don't have to deal with the conflict I feel inside from not having done what I visualized that if I were who I wanted to be, I would have done.
Yeah.
And not judge myself for not having to do it. It's so much easier to just sit down and watch Downton Abbey and not
totally. But I think you go ahead.
What we're forgetting, and this is what we talked about yesterday when we were, and this is going to feed into what we're going to talk about a little later in this discussion, is the element of forgiveness for ourselves. Let's imagine that you were talking about me and I was talking about you. And you said to me, Melanie, I feel so unproductive. I feel like I've done nothing. And, I'm just very disappointed in myself. I would say, Brian, that's ridiculous. Look at all the things you've been going through. You're a wonderful person. You've done all these things. You got to give yourself time to adjust to the new normal. You've got to, and I would just flood you with reasons why you are fine.
Yeah.
And you are in exactly the place you should be. And you would do the same with me. Yeah. And yet for some reason we're unable to do it for ourselves.
Yeah. It's which is part of the room. Well, we're going to get to this, I guess, but it's part of this is the process of creating space. And that's why I love that Eckhart Tolle quote so much, is because it's Richard Burdick has talked about creating a room for radical acceptance.
Yeah.
And that to me is what Eckhart Tolle is speaking to, that the sooner I can create space for radically accepting myself for where I'm at, the sooner where I'm at is, the sooner I am where I'm at. And I mentioned to you yesterday, I'm not being specific enough. What I was going to say was that post Katrina in New Orleans, I mentioned to you that there was this unspoken agreement between people that however you were getting through it was how you were getting through it. Well done.
Yeah.
We were all eating our feelings or drinking our feelings or, watching TV, our feelings, or anxiety meds, and on and on. And there was really this consensus that emerged that that's fine. However you're getting through it is just fine. And you can make new choices in that as you feel ready to, but that is your body's and your mind's instinctive way of managing a trauma. And when I said PTSD, I'm not using that glibly. It's what I've heard, psychological experts refer to, that what we've been living through for the last year is collectively a trauma that is going to impact how you enter the world mentally and physically in many ways for a while.
Well, and it's chronic. It's not like a trauma where, a 2x4 falls on your head or you have a car accident. That's bad enough. But this is a continuing. It's every day.
That's right.
We wake up into it and we go to sleep from it. It's every day.
It's I used the metaphor last year around this time, and I talked for One World, that to me it felt like the house is on fire. So I got out of the house and I'm listening to the firemen now. And that was it. But the reality is the house has been on fire for a year. And every time the fire seems to be tamped down, it flares back up. And that trauma, much like the seasons, you can't avoid. Regardless of how engaged or disengaged you've been, it is impacting you. It is happening inside of you. And what I get from Eckhart Tolle's wisdom is you can't get to where you want to go until you are where you are. Right. If I find myself lost in the woods, what's the best approach for me? Close my eyes and run?
Right.
Or try to climb a tree and see if I can get a sense of where I am?
Well, it's seeing the world clearly. It's
exactly.
Clarity. It's awareness and clarity. But it also goes back to what you've said earlier, which is, and I'm going to paraphrase and tell me if I get it wrong, which how I feel is not who I am.
Correct. That my feelings tell me where I am, not who I am.
Yeah.
And for me, until I show up fully to what is, I am fundamentally showing up to what isn't.
Yeah. Maybe that's what creating space is just the ability to show up to what is. Because the other thing we have to do is not continue, and this goes back to the hula hoop because we have to bring that in, but not continue to hyper focus on our failures for what got us here today or our judgment for what got us here today. But like, okay, I'm here. This is my life. What do I want to do? I get to write the story of the rest of it. Someone just handed me 5 pieces of blank paper and I get to write the rest of it.
That's right.
What does it say? What does it look like given that I'm here right now?
That's
right.
And
I can see all aspects of that clearly, without judgment, without fear, without condemnation.
That's right. And which is not an easy task, to be clear, because it requires of you being willing to feel things that are uncomfortable. And it's sort of counterintuitive to do that, to feel those, and the hula hoop, and for anybody watching who doesn't know what that is a visual aid, a literal hula hoop that I use to define my sphere of influence, your sphere of influence, of control, of where you have actual ability to impact the change and where you experience and address your life. So this creating space happens exclusively in that hula hoop, creating room to show up to what is in order to move into what you most want, but also just in order to be where you are. And I think that's the only place that I can heal. One of the things that one of us said was that I think it may have been Eckhart Tolle, was forgive yourself for not being at peace. Was that part of that same quote?
Yeah, it was.
I think it was. That landed so hard and true for me. And as I create space, I literally do. The more I'm clinging, I'm trying to live into what was, I simply cannot move into what will be.
That's true. No, you are stuck.
I simply can't. Yeah, I've got my feet in the wrong room, and I'm ignoring. Like I said to you yesterday, one of my moments of kind of going, is this all there is? And have I, just small questions like, have I failed at life entirely? And am I, have any value? Just little small questions, that in the midst of that, I realized that there were certain things like that I thought that I wanted to do in the world. Like I mentioned Springsteen on Broadway, that I speak and I sing. I've been doing that for years. And here's Springsteen, who's one of my gods, he does this thing, and I'm like, foiled. I failed. And Wayne Dyer put out The Shift, which was something I had also had in my head, was something failed again. And when I allow myself to create space for and surrender, as Eckhart was directing us to what is in that moment, what I'm hearing the universe say is this has fallen away. Mm-hmm. Because it's creating room for you to do something new, something more. That's off your list now.
That was theirs to do.
Yes.
It's like they say, be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
Yes.
That is theirs to do. It is not yours to do.
Truth. Everyone else is, that's brilliant. I love that.
I wish I had thought of it. I did not. I don't know who said it, but I love it, And when, comparison is just a death spiral, and God knows I do it enough. Now, you said something else yesterday, which I thought was great. Toward the end of our conversation, you said, it's necessary when you have these problematic or these challenging moments to take away the charge.
Yes.
So explain that. I love that. That's a very useful concept.
Well, I will probably get fussed at for this because my girlfriend and I keep a very private life, but we, this comes up in our relationship a lot, where there'll be something that, like it does in all relationships, something big that emerges that sort of sneaks up on you and you don't realize until you're way too far gone that you've been putting off a big talk, a honey, we have to talk moment, I hate that too. Well, we shifted from honey, we have to talk to honey, we get to talk. And the way we do that is by going, so just for the record, it's almost like if you're in the court, let's clarify some basic facts. So do you love me? Yes. Okay, good. Do you like me? Yes. Okay, cool. So what we're aspiring to do here is honor that we love and like each other. So I have this thing to talk about. We don't have to be afraid of it because we're on the same page. We want the same thing.
You've taken the charge away.
Taking the charge out.
We have to have a talk. Does this mean you're leaving me? I am not leaving you. Okay, then I don't care what you say.
It doesn't have to be laced with fear. It's that thing I've talked about before in the hula hoop, that Seinfeldian. I just made Seinfeld a philosopher of note. But that Jerry Seinfeld notion of that pain is knowledge rushing in to fill a gap. If I can remove the charge, I'm opening myself to the information. If I can remove the charge of, like I said a minute ago, the Springsteen on Broadway thing, then I can open myself to the possibility that may be trying to emerge, the new growth that's wanting to happen in this new spring I'm being offered. And if I can remove the charge in this moment around my own sense of falling short in this pandemic, then I can open myself to the insight of that may emerge if I find myself at peace with where I am.
Yeah.
You know,
so that is the only way you can move forward.
It's the only way you're gonna move forward. I mean, one way or another, that's what you're gonna do. In some ways, it's me. Well, I feel like as an American society, we've spent an entire year wanting our dessert and being angry that we had to eat our vegetables to get it. You know, and the reality is, if you're a parent, you're like, I don't care that you're angry. That you're gonna sooner or later you got to eat your vegetables, or there's no dessert. You know, so the sooner I can embrace that, and I like vegetables for the record, but the sooner I can embrace that and show up to my veggies, I can get to the dessert. I don't know if that metaphor works or not, but yeah. So I want to. I know we're. I want to keep us on. Let's move on
and get to. Yeah, one of the things that you brought up, 3 principles or 3 elements or 3 considerations to use or to try in permitting a healing and healing creative space to open. They are avenues for moving forward, or practical tools we can use to help create that space. That's the way I see them. So
yes, that was the hope. So, we'll see.
No, they were wonderful. Because one of the things we do here at One World, which I love about One World, is we don't just talk about theory. We try to pass on practical tools to help people move forward in their own spiritual unfolding. And that sounds very grandiose, but at the end of the day, what it means is getting through the day in peace and joy and balance.
And fundamentally answering the question, what does that look like? Because very often there are things that resonate for us in our lives. You know, I want to be happy. What does that look like? I want this. What does that look like? And the more clarity you can get around that, the more you have actionable things. So yeah, I had offered that there were, to my mind, in my own experience of this, sort of 3 layers. That
I'd love you to talk about them. So
I loosely define them as, and I literally been writing about this for my own edification, but I define them as compassion, as hardening, and as discernment, sort of fundamentally, and I can define each of those. Compassion is where the creating space journey begins, and where I think that the lived experience of Eckhart Tolle's quote is, which is that showing up with radical acceptance to what is, you know, and creating space for one another and for ourselves to be messy.
Well, see, that's it. It's compassion for yourself and for others.
Yes.
I mean, we so often fail to even consider having compassion for ourselves. But that's really the first step in just drawing a calm breath and moving forward into the notion of creating space.
Yes, it's so huge. And I wrote a song about this recently called "This Is What It Looks Like." And it was specifically trying to address this voice in my head that was hating on me so much. And you know, and fundamentally it was just basically saying, like in the last stanza of the chorus, I say, you know, this is what I'm saying. This is what it looks like, and how the night greets the dawn, the look of lost getting found. This is what it looks like. You know, and the sooner that I can create that compassion for myself and live into that for myself, the sooner I create that for others. You know, and that's that as a student of spirituality. That's fundamentally what we're after, right? Is to be the change in the world. And yeah, I mean, I mentioned again that this is of my experience post Katrina, New Orleans, was that creating space for however you're getting through it is how you're getting through it. Yes, but also creating space. Another sort of unwritten agreement between us was the freedom to fall apart in front of each other, and have that not be a sign that you were late or broken or anything, but just that you're moving through things, and there's plenty of room for that. So that first piece is that compassion layer.
Really, and what I liked about that image of Katrina, was the other person, if you were falling apart in front of somebody there, the guy who was there to, you know, fix your electrical system or clean your gutters.
Literally, yes,
fell apart. They didn't try to fix it. They were just there.
Exactly.
Understanding what you were going through and just there.
And that's what I hear Eckhart Tolle saying again. He's not saying show up to the now so you can turn it into a shiny, happy people moment. He's saying show up to the now because that's where the juice is. That's where the gift is. That's where your life is, you know? And yes, in that space, I'm in my mind, I'm going through memories, vivid memories that I have from that time of total strangers just bursting into tears. You know, they'd be over working on the gutters, or as I mentioned, working on the foundation, because our house literally blew off the foundation a little bit. You know, that they'd start sobbing.
Yeah.
And you just be like, okay.
Yeah.
And then they kind of compose themselves again and be like, okay, I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
And creating room. And in that, we open ourselves up and we open each other up to the gift that is everything, not just the joys, you know.
So talk about the hardening process.
The hardening thank you for keeping me moving. Squirrel.
Because to me, that was a fascinating concept.
I was on a Zoom call, shocker, with some friends several weeks back, and one of them has taken up gardening during this time. And she's gotten really into it to the extent that she's installed grow lights in her home so that she could grow seedlings and grow, you know, young plants. And she was talking about how that she was in the process of hardening her tomato seedlings, saplings, seedlings, plants. I don't know what the word is, but she's in the process of hardening them. And I had never heard this word in this context. And what essentially, the way she outlined it, and if you're a master gardener, please forgive me, this isn't the bastion of facts in this moment. This is just how I understood it. But basically, she doesn't just take, oh, good, I got this little sapling here in the house. Apparently, that's a sapling. She doesn't just take that and bring it outside and plant it. But there's a process of bringing it outside for like an hour at a time, and then bringing it back in, and then a little bit longer the next day, and so on and so forth. And it's a way of preparing the plant to be set up for success in the garden in which it's going to thrive and bear fruit. And it's not a function of thinking this plant isn't working, it's flawed, it's broken, because it needs to transition. It's creating joyful space for every element of that transition to be inexorably moving it toward its place to thrive.
Yeah. It's a very intentional transition.
Yes. And I think that as we show up to what is, as we create compassion for ourselves to feel that, and then as we kind of do gradually, as I've said before, as my friend puts it, in trying to establish a relationship with God, is there a certain number of prayers or a certain number of hours of meditation or whatever? He says, no, it's about doing more than zero. And keep doing more than zero. And that process of allowing yourself compassionately to do more than zero in the pursuit of what you think you want for yourself is a process of hardening and preparing yourself to thrive in that gardening. I mean, ironically enough, of course, the process of hardening is fundamentally softening you to be open to what's next.
And the process also includes not judging yourself for not doing more, just doing.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Just doing what you do that day.
Yes. And
that moment.
And let's be clear, that is not a small thing.
No.
And it's not something that happens there's no pill for it. There's no switch you can flip. It's a gentle practice. And it's a practice that, you know, I have I'm the kind of person that if I spill something or break something or whatever, generally speaking, you're going to find me laughing. Because I'm not the kind of person that's like, you're an idiot, Brian, when that happens. I'm the kind of person that'd be like if I drop something, I'm like, you know, I'm going to put that there for a minute. You know, or if I break something, I'll just be like, yesterday, I spilled something in such a dramatic fashion that not only did I spill what it was, but it splashed across the room and somehow landed in my coffee cup. thus spoiling my coffee as well. And in that moment, I went,
yes.
well, I mean, that's not ideal.
Yeah.
And I think for me, fundamentally, the process of that compassion, of that hardening, of showing up to what is a process of creating room for that joyful journey without the judgment that doesn't serve me.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's when you talk about practicality of spirituality, it is fundamentally creating space for what's the most useful tool here.
That is a wonderful segue into your third point. No, that was good. I'll pay you money for that. That was good, because your third point, well, you're exactly right. Your third point is what is useful, what needs to remain, and that's discernment.
It's discernment. And the discernment process in what I was just leaving behind there is about going, is it more useful to me to get to the end of the day hating on myself, or more useful to me getting to the end of the day appreciating the few things or a bunch of things that I did get done? Right. And the discernment process is this, that we have lived through collective trauma. It does not matter the level of acceptance you had of that up until this point. Doesn't matter. It's been a trauma. You have not avoided it. It's been happening around you, and it's going to be happening in all the places you go next. There's going to be healing around that. But we've never had a moment collectively in any of our lifetimes where we've been so robustly offered a moment to discern what serves us and what doesn't. We are increasingly, incrementally going to be offered more and more opportunities to decide what you want to repopulate your life with in terms of people, places, things, experiences. Our lives were dramatically, profoundly, artificially culled.
Well, so much was removed, and now we're getting it back.
And now we're getting it back. And so do you just let that fall back in? Or do you, I don't know what that was, or do you bring intentionality to that? I think there's an opportunity to bring things into my life with practice, with gentle practice, that I bring awareness to it and ask the question, does this thing make me feel more like me or less like me? That's the fundamental question. Does this relationship, does this person want me to show up fully as me? Or do they need me in their life only if I fit a certain role and behave a certain way? And I think that's the profound opportunity and the gift of showing up to my discomforts, my dissatisfactions, my pains, and my joys, is to offer myself that compassionately, that question and that opportunity to go, okay, does this make me more of me or less of me? Because however much more time I get in this one wild and precious life, I would like to experience more of the best of me and offer the world that.
You're exactly right. I mean, we have had, just things we used to take for granted, like going out for coffee with a friend, going out to a movie, going out to dinner, going to a gym, all the things whatever it was, going to work, whatever it was we used to do, was all gone in many instances.
In many fundamental ways, yes.
And so now we get the opportunity to find out to decide what repopulates our attention. Where we put our focus, where we put our love and our creativity and our wisdom and our energy. And I loved that point, because we don't just have to say, open the floodgates, it all comes back, everything's just like it was. It's not.
It's the mother of all do-overs.
Yes.
You told me you're moving your furniture around and such, tomorrow to make room for the new life that is being led in your house at the moment. And unavoidably in that process, you're going to come across things that are like, you know what, now, babe, I don't even like that anymore. I don't know why we have that. Let's not put that back up again. And we already have the mechanisms for doing that and having it be a cleansing experience for us. And that's what we're talking about in the time ahead.
With
in
every
the compassionate hardening, with every aspect of our lives. And it's not going to be always comfortable. There are certain relationships that will want to be back in my life, for instance, that I will be like, how do I lovingly say, not so much? We're done. I don't know what that looks like, but that's okay. We've just been given such an opportunity. It's always been there, of course, but we've never had things reset quite like this.
Yes.
You know,
you're exactly right. It always has been there.
It's always been there, but this is how the universe works. The universe was, the universe sends us. I'm laughing because I just thought of the Marianne Williamson's terminology. She talks about FGOs.
What's that?
Well, a word I can't use here, but I'll use the alternative word that she calls, the universe is forever sending you freaking growth opportunities. And she's saying, and sometimes that comes up and you're like, oh, great, another FGO.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, universe. We could all use a little bit more comfort, but the truth is that the growth opportunities that we are being provided in abundance, to me, come decidedly back to an opportunity to lean into the wisdom of Eckhart and others, of showing up with that radical acceptance, offering ourselves compassion as we start to reemerge, granting that there's a process of hardening.
Mm-hmm.
And that process of what?
A necessary process.
Exactly. And that's not the sign, like the fact that the tomato plant can't move directly, as you were saying to me when I was sharing this with you, that the fact that it can't move directly from just the grow light out into the garden doesn't mean that plants oh, well, I guess I didn't do it right. No, that's a joyful process. That's every time, when you train for a marathon, you don't run 26 miles, you run a mile and then 3 miles. And then all of that is existing in this space in which you're being given the opportunity to choose what makes you more of you, not less of you.
Okay. Brian, this has been great.
Okay.
I love those practical considerations for moving forward as we reemerge, as we, in a sense, as we kind of redefine how we're going to show up, how we are going to live the rest of this precious, wonderful life in the time we have left in a world that is very different.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree. And go ahead.
Well, in a world that we don't even know what it's going to look like, we don't, it's still unfolding. It's still evolving. So we just do not know what our world is going to look like in 3 months or 6 months.
And I think fundamentally what we're trying to say is that's good news. Show up to that. Don't resist it. As much as you can, gently, with practice, show up to that not knowing. That is where knowing emerges, is in that space. And thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation again. I know we went a little bit longer than we planned, but I appreciate it. And the reason we go longer than we planned is because Melanie and I like to have epic 2 or 3 hour conversations. And I
know. Well, this was not that, but thank you, Brian. So I'm going to stop recording, and I just got to say thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. I always love our conversations.
Me too. It's a privilege and an honor. Thank you.